Welcome to Power Lunch live on LinkedIn. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do the program every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and most Fridays on LinkedIn's new platform. It's not really new anymore. Heck, it's almost a year old. In April or May, I think it'll be almost a year old. So not new, so not so new anymore, I guess. The point of the program is to bring on today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, people who are doing amazing work in the world. Their companies are doing amazing work in the world, so that we can learn from what they do. That's why we have them on, so that we can learn. And the way that happens is if you ask your questions. I have a bunch of questions. I have a couple pages of questions, but your questions are more important. So please do ask. If you're on today, please send a message through LinkedIn. We'll also answer. I'll try to check Facebook and the other platforms that we're broadcasting on to see if you ask your questions there. Certainly after the program, where we get most of the listeners and watchers, please ask them, because we'll still engage with you. We'll still answer your question even after the program, and I know my guests will help me out there. Now, as I said, we do broadcast not only on LinkedIn but on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and I think I probably missed one somewhere in there. We broadcast on all those platforms at the same time, so you can watch it just about anywhere. And give it a like or share. If you like the program, give it a like or share, so your network can benefit from these conversations and we can grow. That's another benefit. Now, today I've got Maria Ross. She is founder of Red Slice, a consultancy that advises entrepreneurs and fast growth. I can't speak today. I've been at Carnival all weekend, and I'm a little slow.
Oh boy.
And fast growth businesses on how to build an irresistible brand story that drives growth and impact. Her books, fantastic writer, fantastic books that you should pick up. And we'll talk about that at the end of the program. But one of her books is called Branding Basics for Small Business, and her new book is called The Empathy Edge. And I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, so I can. Maria, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. You sound like me yesterday, so. And I don't have the excuse of getting back from Carnival, so.
I didn't partake very much, and
okay.
I'm too old for that now. It hurts too much. When I was younger, but it's fun to people watch.
Nice.
But how are you? How are you on this beautiful Tuesday?
I'm good. I'm great. I'm excited to be here. I mentioned this is my first LinkedIn Live, so we always have to keep learning and growing with everything. So as I've done a lot of podcasts and a lot of videos, but this is my first LinkedIn Live, so I'm pretty excited about it because I've been leveraging the platform a lot in recent years. So pretty excited to share some info.
Well, it's great to have you on.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about we're going to talk about both the books. Talk about the Empathy Edge here in a minute. But I wanted to start. One of your first books was called Rebooting My Brain, and I wanted to ask you. It was a result of a health scare, I think in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
How did that? Can you talk about that a little bit and how that sort of shaped maybe your worldview, how it changed the way you work, how it changed the way you think in terms of branding and storytelling? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I have managed to combine this idea of talking about branding or a brain injury. And it's kind of surprising how there's so many parallels to running a business and growing a business as it is to how you recover from adversity. But yeah, in 2008, I had just started my own consultancy. I'd been in marketing for a really long time, in corporate, and had a really successful career on the client and agency sides. But I went and started my own brand consultancy. Excuse me, I'm getting over a bad cough. And along with everybody else, right? And in 2008, I had a very sudden symptom of a bad headache. Long story short, about a month and a half later, I collapsed from what was found at the hospital to be a ruptured brain aneurysm. And it was near fatal, so I almost died. And luckily, the brain ninjas saved my life. And my husband happened to be home that day, so he had gotten me to the hospital in time, or he had called the ambulance in time. But I spent about 6 weeks in the hospital. I was temporarily blind while I was there because of the impact of the hemorrhage had impacted my retinas. And then they sent me home, and I did some inpatient rehab. I did outpatient home rehab. I had to get over my cognitive deficits, which was really about adapting to a new me and letting go of some of the things that had defined me before the injury. I slowly got my sight back after some surgeries and things like that, but it was probably a good 2 years before I really got back on my feet, and or a year or so. And then I wrote the book 2 years after recovery. So obviously learned a lot of valuable lessons about how you live your life, because, I was very fortunate and very blessed that I got a second chance. And a lot of people, unfortunately, that have this kind of injury are not as lucky. And they also don't have this crazy, ridiculous, amazing recovery that I have. Even though I still deal with things that people can't see, I'm very high functioning. I was able to restart my business again, get back into things. And a few big lessons I learned from that I really apply to running my business every day is about practicing patience, because I am one of the most impatient people in the world. And
Amen.
just like with your brand, like I try to tell my clients, it's not like you redo your brand strategy and you flip a switch and all of a sudden all these customers are attracted to you and they know, like, and trust you. It takes time, just like with my brain injury recovery. And I was getting really frustrated along the way. And so it's really about measuring the upward trajectory and not, hey, I'm not going to go from 0 to 60 here, but am I moving in the right direction? And that's how I advise my brand clients to look at brand work that they're doing and the brand legacy that they're trying to build with their customers. And then the second thing is really to be resilient and be flexible and adaptable. So again, I had to adapt. I thwarted my own progress for a really long time in my recovery because I kept going back to I used to be able to do this much better, right? I used to remember names better. I used to be able to multitask better, which no human can actually multitask, but that's for another show. So I really made a concerted effort to focus and not so much take pride in the fact that I could do 9 things at once, because you know what? I wasn't doing those 9 things well, right? I was getting them done. So in my work now, it's really about focusing on, 1 or 2 clients at a time. I work very deep. I'm very good about trying to block my time on my calendar and make sure that I'm focusing. If I'm on a conference call, I'm on the conference call. If I'm working on something for a client, everything else is shut off. Part of that is also because the brain injury impacted my ability to focus. And so I have to shut off other distractions when I'm doing a task and I want to do it well. But just like for brand, I mean, that's the thing, is many times companies that are working on their brand, they're trying to boil the ocean. And that's the other thing I advise them on, is you've got to focus. Like your audience is not everyone who needs what you're selling. Your audience is a specific type of person, and you need your marketing and your brand story to be compelling to that person. You'll attract other people in your net, but right. The importance of focus is so key in effective branding and brand storytelling. And for me personally, obviously, it was very important in recovery and in changing the way that I work and how I approach my own business and my client work. So I'm very careful about what I say yes to, what I say no to, what I commit to, what I do. And, looking at my week, I try to think ahead and go, okay, well, I'm not going to, meet someone for lunch 5 days a week. Like, that's not sustainable. Networking is good, but overtaxing yourself and not being able to get your work done is bad. So I would say, that patience and resilience and focus really is something I brought to running when I got back into the business, running the business and going, okay, type A overachiever who, used to take pride in juggling 900 balls at once. This is no way to live. And, what happened to me was partly genetic, but also partly increased stress at that time. And, right. this idea of self-care, I was just discussing this with someone else. Number one, as an entrepreneur or business owner, that's your best business asset. You have to take care of yourself or there is no business. But number two, it's actually the greatest gift you can give to other people, because you're a much more tolerable person to be around when you are not stressed and you are taking care. Yeah, you're taking care of yourself. You're not frazzled. And, not to say I've become like this Buddhist master and I do this well all the time now, but, I'm more conscious of it. I'm more conscious of seeing when the hamster wheel gets out of control and going, okay, this is not productive right now.
Your decisions are way better.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, but but
Yeah,
they're more intentional, I think.
right.
And when we run a business, and just like, you've talked about many times about marketing, it's making those intentional decisions, not those decisions out of fear or everyone else is doing it, or, oh, this is the next shiny object. Like, I need a Facebook page. Why do you need a Facebook page? I don't know. Somebody's telling me I need a Facebook page, So all of these things, it's the core of my work with my clients, is that your brand strategy is that compass for you of going, okay, this is what's going to recalibrate you when you start to get distracted by all these other things. And when you do less and you do it better, it's more effective, which people are like, oh my gosh, I can do less and achieve more. Well, yeah, if you're doing the right things and that focus and a strong brand strategy, an intentional decision-making framework is something that's going to help you be successful running your business, but also, save your sanity. Save yourself the trouble of having a brain aneurysm to learn that lesson.
Ooh.
I know.
Okay. No, that's true. You're right. You're spot on. Absolutely spot on. And I mean, whether the stress causes it or not, I mean, I think it does impact your health, and it does impact your mental health. It impacts, yeah, and everybody else around you, as you said.
Totally.
What is for you? I know you work a lot on the story, the brand story is some of your key work. What makes a good, compelling brand story, and how do you know if yours is compelling?
Yeah, exactly. How do you know if you have spinach in your teeth or not, right?
Right. I mean, because we all think we're interesting, but
Right. And
some aren't very interesting.
I know. And to be fair, number one, it's more about, are you compelling to the right people, right? So again, it's that focus of not everybody who needs what you have is your target audience. For example, for me, there's 9,782 other brand strategists, probably just in the Bay Area alone. But it's about the way I do my work, the kinds of clients I work best with, the value I'm specifically offering, and focusing on that and building a story that's compelling to those people because I know those people so well. This is the thing about getting intimate with your customers or your prospects. This is where the empathy comes in. This is how the whole book, The Empathy Edge, came about, because empathy is such a key part of effective marketing and it's overlooked. So you cannot have a compelling story if you don't truly intimately understand your customers, not we target women between the ages of 25 and 65. Like that's no help for you at all. But what are those ideal client profiles? Who is Rhett? Who is Maria? Who is Jane? What keeps them up at night? What do they value? What do they fear? What do they enjoy doing in their spare time? Like all of those things. If you build the story to be compelling to those people, you might think, okay, but I'm not speaking to all these other people who possibly could buy from me. Well, that's a mistake. When you try to boil the ocean, when you try to be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to no one. So put a stake in the ground with your brand story and have it be utterly compelling and spot on to a core group that you're targeting, to the point that they almost feel like it's a voice inside their head, right? The other thing that frustrated me, I was in technology marketing on the corporate side for a long time. And the thing that used to frustrate me and ultimately led me to doing my own thing was this idea that marketing had to be robotic. It had to sound like everybody else. And we forgot that we were marketing to humans, human beings, even if you're selling B2B. This is the conversation I have. It's like, we don't need an emotional story. We sell B2B. A human being has to make the decision. And most of the time, the decision is a combination of emotion and logic. But research has shown that more of it's about emotion, even if it's, I need to make the right decision or I'm going to lose my job, right?
Right.
The emotional element could be, I want to build my career on this decision. I want to leave a legacy. The emotional decision could be, I just want to have an impact. I want to have a good reputation. Whatever it is, there's a functional reason people buy, but there's also an emotional reason because they have choices and they don't always choose based on price. Hopefully for the higher value added services that probably many of your viewers are selling, it shouldn't be about price. And so it's about building that story that's a combination of what do you care about? Not like, here's why we're so important and all the awards we've won. And here's what our stuff does. And this is why we believe. But what about you? What do you need? What are you valuing? What do you fear? How is this going to help you? And it's, this is a fundamental marketing building block, right?
Big change though. I mean, I remember I'm completely guilty of
me too.
of building a brand story like that initially with the company, with the toy company. And I totally get what you're saying though, because the language was, here's what we can do. Here's what we've done.
Right. And it's okay to bring that in. And as long as, even if you're talking about, you should talk about like your philosophy and sort of how a business came to be, that connects with people, telling a story of like why the business got started. What's your passion for what you do? What do you do beyond just selling this stuff? Like, why are you choosing to make money doing this versus anything else? Right. But the trick that people forget, and this is what I often can help my clients with, is how do we turn that into a nugget of value for the prospect, for the customer? Right. So if you tell me
their problem,
if you value this, or you built your company based on this, what does that mean for me as the reader, as the listener, as the consumer? It's just connecting that. It's almost like that last mile where people forget to connect the bridge. And it's just constantly thinking about what do those people care about. And also a compelling story is using the words that your customers or prospects use to describe the problem, not the jargon you want to throw down their throat, not the jargon the analysts told you to use. But this is why you've got to get out there and have that empathy and talk to your, even if you're talking to somebody, it's not a sales call. It's just an information gathering. You're kind of my ideal client profile. Can I take you to lunch? Can you talk to me about some of the challenges you're having, the pain points around my particular space, and capture their actual words and echo those back in the story? How do they describe the problem? How do they describe the solution they seek? And that's the like, oh my gosh, I'm reading this webpage and they're reading my mind. I have to contact this person. So I think it's that combination of being sort of investigative around it and getting to know those customers, focusing on them. And then everything you do, look at it through a lens of, okay, I wrote this, but okay, now let me read it again. How many I's am I using? How many times am I referencing me? If I am, how can I turn that around to be about the value you get as a customer?
Right. No, that's fantastic, because I know I was completely guilty of that.
I think we all are for our own businesses. Sometimes it takes that objective, tough love.
Guilty. What is, I want to go back a minute. I work with a lot of small businesses and medium-sized enterprises. And one of the challenges I always find is there's sort of this overwhelm, right? They're kind of overwhelmed, just like I am with honestly, I am too, with all the platforms, all the things that we think we have to do today. Or we feel like we're told we have to do, or my son said, well, you have to have a website. My daughter says you have to be on Facebook, and my manager says we have to be on Twitter and LinkedIn. I mean, and so there's so much, that, and I remember back when I was early, I was advertising really early in my career too, and we had three things. We had the newspaper, the radio, and the TV,
right?
And maybe billboards, maybe
right.
Outdoor advertising. So we had four, and it was pretty simple to talk about, advertising and marketing and help us create a strategy for the client.
Right.
I don't think it's so easy today, and I think I see a lot of overwhelm when I talk to clients, and they say, a strategy. I have to have a strategy for that. I have to have a social strategy, and I have to have a strategy for what events in the community I'm going to be involved in. I mean, how do you distill all that down? How do you get client focus, and how do they determine what they should focus on?
Well, there's a couple factors there. I mean, number one, building the brand strategy alone.
Sorry.
No, it's an important one, right? And like you, I'm overwhelmed because just running my business, it can be overwhelming. there's a couple things. So number one, it's that focus aspect. So once a client builds their brand strategy, their brand story, and they really identify these target customers, then it's a question of, okay, number one, where are they? Right? So you go through this exercise and then you go, oh, I remember I worked with a client right at the beginning of my business who, when they came to me, they were like, I have this idea for a TV ad. And I was like, whoa, tactics come later, right? Time out, tactics come later. And that's why I love decoupling the strategy from the tactics, right? I'm not going to, let's build the strategy first, right? And he had this great idea for a TV ad. And then we worked through his ideal client profiles, and he realized that his busy executive didn't have time to watch TV. They weren't watching TV. That's not where they were getting their news. That's not, maybe they were watching a Netflix movie with their kid when they had time, but a much better investment was, NPR on the person's way to work. Because when we built the profile, oh, this person gets their information from NPR while they're commuting. So building those profiles can really help. And I've worked with clients who, when they build a profile, they're very adamant about like, this person is not on Twitter. Like this person hates Twitter and da-da-da-da. So good, that, right? Now, the question becomes, well, what if you have a profile where they are an active social media user, for using social media as an example? Where do I go? And that's where I intersect that with just double down. If they're in all of those places, just be in a couple of those places and do it really well. Be consistent, show up, understand the rules of the platform. What works on LinkedIn doesn't work on Facebook, for example. What works on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. They all have different rules. They all have different etiquette. They all have different best practices of the kinds of content and posts that work. So pick a few in your lane and double down on those. Because if your ideal customers are in all those places, then they're going to be in those three, right? So would you rather be flippant and inconsistent across 5 of them and not get any traction? Or would you rather just focus on 2 or 3 and really dig deep and do it well? So I think that's the thing, is if you've got the brand story and you've got the brand strategy baked, you know what you're saying. If you build the ideal customer profile as part of the brand strategy, you know who you need to talk to and where they are. Now you can build the plan on where you think you should be. Now, this doesn't take an effect of, what about if there's an up and coming platform and my people are not on there yet, but they might be? That's sort of your experimentation playground. That's not something where you're going to like invest significant dollars and time right now, but maybe you establish a presence there and you figure that out as you're going along.
Right.
But also, some of those platforms are very specific. Like TikTok is very specific to Gen Z. I mean, if that's not who you're targeting, you don't have to worry about it. You know what I mean? Now, maybe eventually you will, because that's what they used to say about Instagram. There were different things they said about Instagram when that first came out, but you can deal with that later. You don't have to be there now.
Should be aware of it. Right.
Be aware of it. And, I know that there's a lot of gurus out there that talk about like, well, you need to be like first runner advantage. Like you need to be on there. Like think about if you had been one of the first people on Instagram. But, choose your poison, right? Overwhelm and inefficiency and ineffectiveness, or
and wasted ad dollars and wasted money.
And wasted time, wasted ad dollars, more headache, or wait a little bit and see if your people eventually get there. So I think trying to boil the ocean is the biggest problem with that. And I tell my clients, they're like, well, my ideal clients, they're on LinkedIn, they're on Twitter, okay. Well, when you're a solopreneur, for example, if you have a small business and you're the only one making decisions, what do you actually like to do? Don't do the things you don't like to do, because you won't do them consistently. Right. When it's a larger organization where you might have someone in charge of marketing and social media, again, it's just, where are you going to focus those dollars? Like, go deep, don't go shallow.
Yeah, that's great advice, because you spread yourself too thin, and
exactly. And then it's not effective. And then you go, oh, I'm getting no ROI from this platform. Well, no wonder.
and you're stressful. I mean, when you look at your inbox on LinkedIn and it's got 1,500 messages because you can't answer them. I mean,
right. You just can't.
It doesn't make any sense to just spread yourself so thin. That's great advice.
Mm-hmm.
What is so I know a lot of your work focuses on helping people sort of realign and articulate their brand strategy and story. How does that accelerate growth when you can bring that alignment all together and with your story and with your strategy, how does that accelerate growth, I guess?
Well, I mean, I see it as foundational, right? So again, if you're out there doing random tactics without this foundation, you're what I call performing random acts of marketing. You're just, and nothing's working, right? You're not getting ROI. If you can take the step back, and I specifically designed a process that was like one I would have wanted when I was an executive. It's not 12 months long. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, let's do something quick and dirty and get in alignment in 6 weeks. And then we have a basis now to make these decisions like we were talking about earlier, right? So it accelerates growth because you're saving time, but you're also investing and doing the things that are going to be more effective. So that, again, it's that go deep or be shallow. So I feel like that's a growth accelerator. Number two, the alignment issue, especially for an organization where there's multiple people on the marketing team, there's multiple functions in the organization, some of the fast growth companies I work with. Right. The alignment exercise is huge because there's all these disparate groups that are sort of supposed to be telling the same story, and they are touching a customer in different ways. And if you're not aligned in what you're communicating and what you're doing, you don't get that benefit of being in front of that. What's the old adage for marketing? Like 7 to 10 times before they remember who you are. You're always starting from ground zero. But think about like a laser beam, if they're all pointed at the same target, it's much more powerful. And that will accelerate growth in terms of, maybe it'll only take a quarter or two before it gets traction. It's whatever that measurement is that you're doing for whatever that initiative is. If everyone's singing from the same choir book, it's much more effective that, okay, now we hit the ground running, and we don't have all these stops and starts of like, well, I thought we were telling this story to the market, and I found out customer success was telling something else. And you just get that clear alignment across the functions, not even just marketing, but being able to tell that consistent story. And also that alignment, the emotional part of my work, which is kind of exciting, that I didn't realize when I started out, was how much the brand strategy project revitalizes morale and revitalizes passion for the work. So when people all have input into and understand the brand story, and it's a story that is compelling not only to your customers, but it's motivational internally as well, people want to move faster. They're excited. They bring a new energy to work. They bring a new energy to what they're doing. They want to get going. And I've found that is sort of an unseen and untalked about growth accelerator.
Well, that actually makes more sense in terms of accelerating growth if everybody on the same page and
totally
and operating in that way and excited about it.
Right.
People work harder, so you get better results.
Well, and if you've got a bunch of people who are not excited, if you're not excited about your own product or service or company, it shows up in your marketing. You don't think it does, but it does. It's that magic, it's that emotional sauce of like, how a good cook says, well, I added love into the recipe. It's adding that passion. Yeah.
It's flat when it's not genuine, when it's not authentic,
totally.
When it's not, and people see it. People see right through. You're absolutely right. So let's jump over now to the empathy edge. Mm-hmm. Your premise in the book to me was that if you lack empathy in your business, if you lack empathy, that it can be the root of a lot of your problems in the business. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that's the flip side of it is that empathy is actually a really strong competitive advantage that is overlooked. Right. But the lack of it causes so many of the problems that we just chalk up to like, oh, that's corporate life, or that's the way business is, or that's the way things are done.
That's how we excuse it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
absolutely.
So how do you turn that around from a negative to a positive, and how do you? What does empathy look like in a business, I guess, is my question.
Right. So I define empathy. There's a lot of different definitions of empathy, but the kind of the common thread, and also the one that makes the most sense in the business context, is this idea that empathy is about perspective taking. It's about understanding someone else's point of view and using that information to then act, to then take an action. It's sort of an information gathering mode. Empathy is not so much a feeling. It's being able to take another person's perspective and, where appropriate, feel what they're feeling, but it doesn't always have to be about feelings. You don't have to be sitting there crying next to somebody, but it's about, okay, as I make this decision, as I interact with you, I'm always looking through a lens of like, how are you seeing the situation? What is your point of view? And then we can find common ground to have a productive conversation. So whether it's internal for your culture, for yourself as a leader interacting with your team, or, where my wheelhouse is about showing empathy for your customers so that you create more engagement and connection. It's all about always looking from the other person's point of view. It's not about being nice. We don't want to confuse that, because sometimes you can be really empathetic and have to make a really hard decision.
Sure.
I always say one of my most empathetic bosses was someone who had to lay off the entire marketing team. But the way that he did it, and the way that we were supported, and the way it was just everything about it was about, how are these guys going to feel? How are they going to be seeing this situation? And he acted accordingly. So that's, for me, the biggest thing. We can take an empathetic mindset all we want, but if we don't take action based on that information, then it's just in our own heads, right? Mm-hmm. So, and often what that looks like is compassionate action, but it's not being nice. It's also not caving in to whatever somebody else wants.
Because that can seem like it's caving in, just acquiescing to anything.
Yeah, no, that's acquiescence, right? That's submission. That's not empathy. Empathy could be delivering information to a customer about a policy that the customer doesn't want. I'm really sorry, we can't take that return. It's beyond the time limit or whatever. Right. But how do you have that conversation? And what, knowing what the customer might be going through, what policies exist within the organization, so you can say, but here's what we can do for you, because we understand that you're seeing this situation this way. Okay. When you look at like United Airlines, for example, well, yeah, they talk about customer service being important and caring about their customers, and empathy dressed up as something else. But when you create policies that contradict that, when you create a policy that says it's okay for us to kick a paying customer off a flight if it's overbooked because our own people need to fly, right, then you're not operationalizing empathy. So it's not enough to just hire a bunch of really nice people and hope they do the right thing. You also have to create policies and practices within the organization that make it really easy for people to default to an empathetic mindset. And this is the kicker too, that they're rewarded for it. Do you have rewards and accountability within your organization? It's not just talk. It's not just a pretty poster on the wall, but what do you do to reward empathetic behavior? What do you do to show accountability when someone doesn't act that way, or is difficult to work with, or doesn't find common ground with people? And companies call it different things. Some of the companies I profiled in the book talk about it in terms of humility. Others talk about it like one of our values is service to others, but they put their money where their mouth is, and they have reward structures in place, and they have policies in place that, like I say, they're not legislating empathy, but they're making it really easy to default to that for people.
They're empowering their people to have it and
right,
to act on it, and they're giving them the tools to do it.
Exactly. So, right.
To me, that's the powerful part of that. And you can tell, we've all had those customer service experiences where that were either great or just weren't.
Right. And they don't always end the way you think you want them to end, but you walk away from the interaction feeling good about the brand, still staying a loyal customer, still having positive word of mouth. You might even tell people like, this was a horrible thing and they actually said no to me, but the way they handled the call was amazing, right? Right. So I talk about anonymously in the book an experience that I had online, because that's really hard these days, of how do you create an empathetic brand in a digital world when you're communicating over email. And I had a horrible experience with one of these like media darling e-commerce companies because of the way the situation that went wrong was handled. I was blamed as a customer. I was also told I needed to be more patient with their response because they were really busy because they had a lot of other customers. So basically their success was the reason I was getting poor customer service, right? Never a good strategy. So, and then, and very, very disempowered employees to be able to help me in the moment, like you were saying. So when I asked for redress of the situation that went wrong, she was like, well, I could ask. You know what I mean? That's not empathetic. So,
and the fact that you have to ask, I mean, that's the other thing that drives you crazy in those situations, right? Is that person that you talk to, that person you got on the line eventually, isn't empowered to help you.
Right. And that's a policy decision, right? That's a policy and training decision. That's not, that person's not being nice. Yeah.
It's a trust issue on the customer service side.
Yes.
Right. When you have to go to layers and then you have to explain yourself again. I mean,
it's horrible. It's horrific. And we can all relate to that. Right. But when you are able, the biggest thing that when I was researching the book and also asking some experts, can you screen for empathy when you're hiring? Right. And you can ask some very targeted questions. You can talk about scenarios. You can dig in with their references beyond the resume and the technical prowess they may have, and say, how do they get along with other people? How do they collaborate? Talk to me about a time that you had a difference of opinion with someone within the company. How did you get past that? Asking questions beyond what's in the resume. Google did a great study of their hiring and firing and promotion data to test the hypothesis of the fact that only people with really strong technical skills can succeed at Google. And the data proved them wrong. The data proved that some of the most successful and innovative people within Google were not necessarily the most technically proficient, but they were high in empathy, communication, and collaboration. And that's how they got things done. So you can sort of hire for it, but it's about also, like you said, what are you doing to empower those people to have what I call situational fluency? Can they be in the moment dealing with you? Can I be empathetic to what Rhett's issue is right now and do something for him without having to get 9 approvals to do it? Can I think on my feet and in the moment have that empathetic fluency? And that's harder to find.
Right, and just be engaged to feel like. I mean, what I'm looking for at that moment is somebody to just feel what I'm feeling, or at least understand it.
Right.
Understand what I'm dealing with, and maybe offering a solution. If not, make me feel like you care anyway. Right. And not sitting there typing on your keyboard.
Totally. Yeah. And that's about, this is why I talk in the book about, for me, culture and brand are 2 sides of the same coin, right? You can't go to the market with a brand promise and then internally you're a hot mess. Like, you actually have to live your brand inside. Branding starts from the inside out. And when I talk to my clients about their brand strategies, most of it is with the eye of towards the market. But I also, as a former change management consultant, ask, well, what are you doing internally to support that claim that you're making? What are those policies? What is the culture like? And so in those examples you're giving where you just get this horrible customer service, I bet you 99.9% it's because there's a horrible culture. They are not actually being respected as employees. Happy employees equal happy customers, right? And again, not just giving employees what they want, but are they in an environment where they feel seen, heard, and understood? And all the data that I share in the book shows that leads to all the great external benefits when you create a workforce. It leads to increased innovation. It leads to increased collaboration, better retention of your best talent, all of those things. But all of those things impact the customer experience.
How do you change? Let's say you realize you've got this sort of unempathetic sort of culture. I mean, are there some ways, in your opinion, that you can sort of, and I don't think this is overnight, obviously, but how do you change? I mean, how do you change a culture that you've got and you want to make it better? I guess that's to me a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier if you're the CEO, and like I said, you can sort of create a movement of like, this is how we're going to do things around here. But the reality is most of us are not. So what do you do as an individual to impact change within your sphere of influence? And this is why the first section of the book is about. You have to work on yourself first, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. But it's empathy starts from the inside out, and it starts from the individual out. So the leader or the individual, even if you're not a leader, you might be an aspiring leader, but you as an individual, what can you do to strengthen your own empathy muscle so that in your interactions with people, number one, you get better results, but number two, you start to become a model of success and you start to create a ripple effect. So people are looking at you as you get things done, as you find success, and they go, wow, I'm looking at how you get that done. And I'm seeing that you're not being, overly competitive. You're not in a bad way, because competition and empathy can still coexist. You can be competitive and be empathetic. But I see the behavior that you're exhibiting in order to achieve success. And you're creating a model for me of like, oh, that gets you success here. That helps you. And so then you start to have a ripple effect on the people you interact with every day. If you're a team leader within your organization, you can create a subculture within your team. And then as your team is successful and all of a sudden, wow, none of your people are leaving. All the other areas of the company, they're experiencing higher turnover. But Rhett, your department, you're keeping your people way longer. What's going on here? And that's where it's like, okay, now that you're successful, people want to know how you did it. And so you become that model of like, this is a way you can achieve success here. At the end of the day, you may find that you can't have enough impact and you have to leave the organization, but that's empathetic too, of like empathetic for yourself, of like, I'm just not aligning with my values in this organization. I don't want to do the things I need to do to achieve success here. And this is why many of those companies who are not looking at empathy as part of their culture are not going to be around very long, because the top talent is going to leave. The younger generations of talent are demanding that kind of workplace environment, and they won't go in a tight labor market. They won't go to a company that they think is not treating their employees well or treating their customers well. So I think it really does start with you as an individual and how you create success in your own career and in your own day-to-day activities, how you get things done. If you're getting promoted and you're getting singled out for praise, people are going to go, oh, Rhett, how did you do that? I see, like, you're doing that in this way. Maybe that'll work for me.
Right. How do you, if you are forced to leave, what are the signs of an empathetic company? If you're looking to make that transition and you're looking for that new step, are there outward signs of
I think there's a few. So there's been a lot of correlation between diversity in the executive ranks and in leadership and on the board with companies that have an empathetic culture or an empathetic mindset. Because quite frankly, if you've got that diversity, those people have to be seeing other points of view. They're not all of the same point of view, right? And that is empathy. Now, you have to have empathy to make diversity work. Otherwise, you just are a bunch of people who disagree with each other, arguing at the table. But I think that's a really good sign. And I've seen some reports coming out recently that talk about it in terms of, if you've got more women, for example, in the leadership team, that's a good sign that the company's making good decisions, because they're wanting that diversity of thought at the top ranks. If you seek diversity of thought, you're being empathetic. You're trying to get other perspectives and opinions onto the table. I think it's also about, how is the culture structured? Meaning, what does get rewarded here? How do people, like I was saying earlier, if you talk about empathy or whatever you call it, service, humility, compassion, is that on the performance reviews? Is that a criteria for getting promoted? Are you asking me questions when I'm in the hiring process where you're trying to ascertain how empathetic I am? So those, I think, are good markers of like, I think this is a good culture here. And if they're investing in people, if their head of people or HR is not just a check the box position where, all this person does is fill out forms, right? They just work on benefits. But are they actually doing things to create a safe, nurturing, trusted work environment where the diversity of thought can be harnessed and collaboration is stressed as an important success skill? I think those are a few of them.
I'd
But
love to see that. I'd love to see the things you just talked about. I'd love to see the questions about empathy. I mean,
yeah,
it's just so rare.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever, when I was looking for a job,
Hmm.
uh, ever had an interview question
No,
anywhere remote to that.
no, because we look at we look at the resume, right? It's like, oh, you've got the skills to accomplish the job, but how do you approach your work? And it doesn't mean, this whole thing about some people being naturally empathetic. Well, I'm not naturally empathetic. That's BS, because science and research has shown that we are hardwired in our DNA for empathy. They've done studies on infants, other species, and empathy is actually how our species has survived. That collaboration and that ability to connect is how we've survived. But some people haven't gone to the empathy gym in a while and the muscle has atrophied. Maybe they grew up in an environment where empathy was not part of the game, right? And not rewarded. Maybe they've been in a workplace for a while that's sort of beaten it out of them. Other people have grown in an environment where it's strengthened, it's nurtured, it becomes part of their default mode, right? So
Right.
even if you get those questions, or you're asked, maybe you're talking to someone whose muscle has atrophied a little bit, is there at least a curiosity, a desire to strengthen that muscle? Are they actually looking at your company because they want to be more empathetic? They want to be placed in an environment where that empathy muscle can be strengthened. So these are all questions that go beyond, a 20-minute screener interview.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely onto something here, because I think employees and customers are going to demand it and are demanding it now.
They're demanding it now. Yeah.
And I think we have so much more information on companies now, what they
Mm-hmm.
stand for and and I know I make decisions all the time now based on a company's politics, based on a company's actions,
Their values.
their values, and 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 I'm a creature of habit, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean we're starting to make decisions on those factors, and I think you're absolutely right and onto something about how this is not just something that's good to do. It's almost a business imperative.
It's totally a business imperative. And I spoke to some generational experts, actually, because I had a lot of data in there about empathetic organizations appealing to millennials and Gen Z, not just from a talent perspective, hiring, but from a consumer perspective, where they're going to spend their money. And she was talking about the fact that one of the experts that I interviewed was like, this is actually it's getting to the point where this idea of an empathetic culture that then bleeds into an empathetic brand is almost not a competitive advantage anymore. It's sort of table stakes for this incoming, you could say all you want about other generations, but it's the incoming talent generation, and good for them for demanding more from the workplace and from the brands that they spend their hard-earned money with. And so it's coming to the point that those companies will die, right? Because they won't be attracting that best talent anymore. And therefore they won't be innovating. They won't be delivering those stellar customer experiences.
Right.
And they'll die. So I was kind of shocked, because I spoke to her about a year ago. I was working on the book for like 3 years, and I was shocked at how concretely and decisively she was making that statement. She's like, everything I've seen is that this is almost like you don't get a medal for this anymore. Like, you need to have it.
This is going to be part of your business plan, because
exactly.
Really,
and we should point out, we're talking about genuine empathy here, right? And I have a whole section in the book about the empathy veneer. And that's where it's like, okay, we want our brand to be seen empathetic. Let's give to the soup kitchen once a year at the holidays. This is why it has to start from the inside out. And it's got to be about the makeup of the leaders, the makeup of the culture, and then the makeup, so that then it's believable and it's authentic. And if
you're not going to be able to hire people. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to last long as a CEO if it's not
real.
If it's not real. It's going to go deep. It's got to go deep. It's got to be the real thing.
Right. And that's why all of these things of like, well, how do you make it real? Well, again, it's about hiring the right people. It's about creating the right culture. It's about operationalizing empathy. It's about creating the right customer service policies and procedures and interactions. It's about designing your website in a way that understands the journey the customer's on. All of these things are the way that you build authentic empathy into the equation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're on something. And I think you've got a great message. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And so where can people buy the Empathy Edge?
They can buy it all the usual suspects online or at one of their local bookstores. But the main website for the book is theempathyedge.com.
Okay.
And my main website is red-slice.com, which will also take you there too.
So if they want more advice and if they want to bring you on as a consultant, then they can come to redslice.com.
Red-slice.com. Mm-hmm.
Slice, right.
Uh-huh.
We'll put a link in the
That'd
show.
Be great.
To that. And thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you.
The Power Lunch on LinkedIn Live. A couple notes. If you want to find out the upcoming schedule, it is powerlunch.live, powerlunch.live, the website. And that's got all of our guests for this week and next and going into March. And if you want to bring us on, we also take the show on the road. We're going to be in Spain in June at Webbit. I think we've got something else coming up in April. We were just in San Diego recently. So we do take the show on the road. We can broadcast live from your event, from your trade show, from your conference, and interview your top guests and speakers. And anyway, if you want to find out more, you can also go back to the website and do that and be in touch. But until tomorrow, go out and do good work, do good things, and have a great day.